Every Indian temple, if it is thousands of years old or if it's even constructed in our days, every Indian temple on the top has a Vimana. Now the Vimana, I said before, had different shapes, but on every top of an Indian temple, still today, you have a Vimana. Some of the Vimanas look like today's UFOs. They had the shape round or elliptic. Other Vimanas had another form. But still on top of the Indian temple is a Vimana. And the Vimana was one of the flying machines of the Hindu gods. Vimana is what we would call today a space shuttle. It's just a small space vehicle which moves between the planet and the mother spaceship in orbit. But with the Vimana itself, you don't make space travel from star to star. These diagrams are not extremely old. Some of these diagrams were created only in the 17th century. They are not thousands of years old in some of these Indian books. These designers who made these diagrams, they designed it out of the old text. They read the old text, and because of these texts, they made a design. Well, it must have looked like that and that. But the fact is, there were different types of Vimanas which looked completely different, comparable to a helicopter and a jumbo jet. It's not the same thing, but both machines can fly. The idea of chariots of the gods has come in the Bible with the prophet Ezekiel. But the prophet Ezekiel, again, you can compare to Indian chariots. You know, what the Indian gods were flying in chariots. The chariots were always Vimanas. The chariots were always what we would call space vehicle, but not mother spaceships. The chariots only had a small distance. They could move in our solar system, but not to another star. These Indian descriptions about flying machines are not just fantasy, are not just allegories. No, they were real because the humans saw them and whole groups of humans saw them and then described what they saw. They described that one of the gods descended with the Vimana and the humans, hundreds of it, were watching them. They described that some of these Vimanas had wheels and others had no wheels. They described the noise which the Vimanas made. At least some of the Vimanas made noise. Others were quiet. So all this we have descriptions. Descriptions handed down and written by humans. Just read the book Dronaparva. It's full of these flying machines of ancient India. Professor Dr. Kanjilal, who is the Sanskrit professor of the Sanskrit College in Calcutta, a brilliant man, he has, in our modern time, translated some of these Indian Vedas in a special book with the name Flying Machine in Ancient India. And this is a proper scientific work. It's like in the Bible, for example. In the Bible, you have Moses, first book of Moses, chapter 3, then verse number 27. The translation of Professor Dr. Kanjilal is the same thing. He writes, such Veda, chapter XY, verse XY, and so on. It's a scientific work. There is absolutely no doubt, for the one who knows it, that in India, flying machines were described, and different types of flying machines. And there is no doubt that there were mother spaceships, which were around the Earth in an orbit. The Vimanas were the small vehicles we would today call the Vimana space shuttles. You see, in orbit you have the mother spaceship. The old Indian called the mother spaceship cities in the sky, at least in the translation. And in Dronaparva they clearly say that one of the gods destroyed the tree city with a gigantic weapon. The weapon was shining brighter than the sun. The elephants were turning around. The elephants were burning and crying. All the animals were crying and dying. every metal which the warriors had on their body, they took off and cried because the metal was hot, was cooking it. The birds who were flying fell down from the sky because it was all too hot. And then they say, even those who were far away, in a far distance of the weapon from heaven, the unborn child in the mother's womb died because they were all infected by the rays of gods. So in that time, nobody could have known something about radiation, about X-rays. They could not have known that even the unborn babies in the mother's womb would die because of it. But this is clearly handed down in the Drona Parva, part of the Mahabharata. You see, in our Christian judo tradition, we have what we Christians call the Bible, or the Jewish community call the Torah. So maybe this is, let's say, 500 pages. But the Indian traditions, these are 5,000 pages. It's not comparable. And you know, all the other traditions, the written traditions, disappeared. I said before, the Maya books were destroyed, except 3, and 2 of them we cannot read. In South America, the Incas, they had no writing. In India, they had writing, and an incredible amount of writing. The same thing happened in Tibet. Tibet is the highland. There are 2 writings which survived, the Kanshur and the Tanshur. These are the holy writings of the Tibetan society. And again, it starts that the gods descended from heaven. Now these gods in Tibet, they have names which you cannot spell out. And one of these gods definitely was the teacher, because he teach their students. They explain how he looked like. He looked like a human, by the way. He was very, very smart, very nice, and so. And when he disappeared, they describe how he took off from the earth in a Vimana. And all the students were watching the Vimana. It went slowly, slowly up, and they saw it that the Vimana has become smaller and smaller. They describe it finally, it was so small like an egg. And then it was becoming like a little point, and then it disappeared. And before this God in Tibet disappeared, he left, like in other societies, writings for mankind. But the writings are somewhere, he says, hidden in a hidden place, and will all only come to the eyes of the humans again when the time is ripe. Obviously, we don't have these writings of the gods. The time is not ripe yet. India is the land of the gods. Everything is always connected together. I mean, when we hear the story of Arjuna, he was up in another spaceship. It's the same story as we hear from another part of the world, from Enoch, who was up there, who learned the language. It's all different names, but in the base, the same stories. Arjuna was the one who was up there in the cities of the sky. And he was there many times, not only one. Between his visits on the sky, he always returned to the earth. Arjuna even gives the name of his pilot. The pilot's name was Matali, who brought him up there. And Arjuna describes that he saw hundreds of different Vimanas up there. There were 3 cities in the firmament, not in heaven. Heaven can be a space of happiness. Heaven can be a place where we go after that. Heaven can even be the place where the gods rule. But here, the 3 cities were in the firmament. The humans observed the 3 cities in the firmament. They described them because they looked differently. Now, Arjuna was one of the humans who was up there in these 3 cities. And he describes the 3 cities. He describes the fight. And he describes that there were many, many Vimanas. Vimanas are different, have different shape. There is not only one type of Vimana. You see, today, we have different shapes or types of aircrafts. A helicopter is not the same thing as a jumbo jet. Or a military fighter is not the same thing as a private aircraft. We have different shapes in aircraft. The same thing happens in ancient India. All these Vimanas had different qualities, different speed, etc. Some of the Vimanas transported 20 humans out there. Others of the Vimanas had only room for 2 or 3 humans or gods. Some of the Vimanas had wheels. With the wheels they could land on earth and they could move on earth. Other Vimanas had no wheels. They could not land on earth. They were always standing over the ground. There are differences in Vimanas. So The funny thing is, all this is Indian tradition. It's all in the Mahabharata. And on Earth, there are no industries to construct Vimanas. So the whole knowledge of the Vimana comes from outside. There is no technological evolution for the Vimanas on Earth. There is no report that some humans constructed Vimanas, that there was some sort of Vimana industry or evolution in technology to create the Vimana. The Vimanas always came from the gods. And the gods again came in their mother spaceships, which the old Indian call cities in the sky.